Hello and welcome, everyone. We are jumping back into this. We haven't done a user group from the Milwaukee area Power Apps area in quite a while.
Yeah.
So we're getting the band back together again. This is the original band of Power Apps people. So jumping back in, welcome everyone. We really appreciate your listenership. This is going to be a user group session led by Steve and Anthony. They are the leaders of the Power BI user group inside the Milwaukee area. Welcome, everyone. I'm going to dodge out here. I'm just going to produce things from the background. Take it away, gentlemen.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And that's the Power Platform user group, of course. Hopefully, maybe you've seen a few of these before. If not, welcome. Me and Anthony used to run them. Probably started a couple of years ago. Now we took a bit of a hiatus, but we're back and looking to get going.
Agreed. Awesome, Steve. So do you want to give an intro to your side of things and then?
Yeah, definitely. So if you don't know us, my name's Steve Campbell. I'm based over in the UK, in London, if you couldn't tell. Used to be in Milwaukee, how I know Anthony and Mike here. So we're back. I'm much more on the Power BI side. So
yeah, go Pack Go, right?
Yep. So I do a lot more of Power BI. A lot more on that side. We look at kind of how things interact. Anthony over here is more on the Power Apps. So together we kind of do a lot on how all the Power Platform works together, how it integrates, and all of that. So Anthony, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks, Steve. Yeah, it's definitely really exciting to be back. Both Steve and I have had lots of changes that have happened, and even Mike and I were just talking about that prior to this as well. So really happy to be back. So I'm still in the Milwaukee area. Steve, we actually just recently met up for some beers and some other some appetizers and such. So that was a good time. But so he does come back to Wisconsin often, which is great. And so he still supports us in the Milwaukee area with his Power BI expertise. So a little bit about me and myself, Anthony Escopito out of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And so I've met Mike and Steve just through the community, and we've had a great time putting on, these videos for the Milwaukee / greater Wisconsin area, I suppose. And so we're just happy to be back and share a little bit about ourselves and, what we've been up to.
Yeah, and if you couldn't tell by Anthony's t-shirt here, he is actually working for Microsoft at the moment.
Yep, recently it changed. So that was last March, and we haven't had a video. I think it was right before that is when the last video was. So it's been a little while.
Yeah, definitely. So both of us got new jobs actually. So I'm actually now launched fully my own consulting company here, Sunny BI. So looking forward to doing that a lot more, and also just to produce more content that I can do now that I'm independent. So with that, I'd like to kind of share my screen. I might just give a little update on what I've been doing and show you my new website out here. So anyone ever interested? I know there's a lot of things coming out Microsoft at the moment. Have a check, Sunny BI training. I'll get the link posted out for you. Right now, we have some nice little videos. If you're interested, have a quick look. Nice and easy, 2-3 minute videos explaining some data concepts. You can kind of click your topics here. If you want to learn about some Delta, you want to learn lake houses, anything like that. Lots more adding. So definitely come check this out. I'll be adding more and more videos. Nice 2 minutes, very simple, no jargon, no code explanations. All this new stuff, trying not to get lost. Awesome.
Cool.
With that, I just wanted to introduce that and say, look forward to contributing more to the community. I think we'll get started, and we're going to dive straight into the session. So this session is a bit of an update.
Did you give a date on when the next session is?
No.
Okay. I wasn't sure if there was a date for that yet.
No, I don't think we have one set yet.
Okay, cool.
So yeah, this session, me and Anthony, actually, this was our first ever session using Power BI, Power Apps, and Power Automate together. I think since we did that, how long ago was that? A couple of years ago?
Yeah, I mean, it was a long time ago, it feels like. So there's definitely some updated features since then.
Yeah, so want to dive in and go through everything new that's come out. Been some pretty cool ways that we can use all of these tools, Power Platform together. More and more coming. So we just wanted to give a bit of a whirlwind tour. I'll say we're going to go very quick. This isn't going to be a technical session. We'll show maybe a couple of technical bits, but we really just want to show different ways each of these things can interact. And we'll do a more technical one, how to build all this stuff in the future. But I wanted to give a nice high-level overview. And then we're going to round out with Anthony actually showing something that we built in Power Apps to help you manage Power BI as well. All right. So with that, let me start the stream. So the first thing I want to show you is really on how we can integrate Power Apps into Power BI. So you see here, I've added a Power BI report, and I've just added the visual Power Apps. And I'm going to hit Create New. So that was from Power BI, and now this is opening a Power App, right? So I'm embedding this Power App into my Power BI. So I started with my Power BI report. You can see here, it's opened me a brand new Power App. Because I started with Power BI, this Power App's actually given me this something called Power BI integration. So to show you what's going on here, this is just a standard Power BI report. I've added a Power Apps visual. And in my Power Apps visual, I've added a whole bunch of columns here. Now, what's happening is that Power BI is passing these columns directly into my Power App. So let me get rid of this and show you a label here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to say, I want to load some of my Power Apps, Power BI data into my Power Apps. So here, this Power BI is passing this data, which is the same as the table, into my Power Apps. So I'm just going to say, I'm going to take my first because it's a table and I want to display one row. And what I can actually do is I can use this Power BI integration. This is actually a table that's passed from Power BI into my Power Apps. So I'm going to say, hey, I want to load my Power BI integration and I want to get the data out of it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say .data. And then I just need to close the parenthesis in the wrong place here. Let me just fix that. So I'm going to say my Power BI.data. And now this gives me all of my Power BI data that I've loaded into this Power App. Now you can see here, these are the same column names that I'm loading from my Power BI report. So I'm going to click customer name. And you can see here that Premier Cameras Limited is this first customer name that's loaded in. You can see that Premier in the table above my Power App, this is the same data that I'm loading into my Power App visual, right? Custom name, Premier's camera. So what's happened here is I've actually made a link from my Power BI with a table, with a load of data, pushed it directly into my Power App. Pretty cool. But let me show you what I made earlier and what I can actually do now that I've got this data from this Power BI report into my Power Apps. So here's what I made earlier. What this is you can see here, it's letting me take adjustments. Now, the use case for this is that there's a lot of salespeople and they're looking at some forecasts of their data. Now, salespeople, they know their data a bit better. So we've made forecasts based on an algorithm. They might want to make some adjusted forecasts. So you can see here, it's loading some of the Power BI data we'll go through. And then it's actually going to let them make an adjustment of that data. So this is actually allowing native write back from their Power BI, and we'll show how that works. So heading over to my Power BI report, you can see in this table, I've just loaded in, and basically we have a customer name, a month, adjustment, and forecast. So what this works is each of this customer for each month, they've got a forecast. You can see 17 million for the top. And I've got an adjustment value. The adjustment value is what the salespeople will put in, and that's the bit they can edit. We want to keep our original forecast, but we want the salespeople to add an adjustment value to say, hey, actually, I think that this might be slightly different to what you've said. And so we want to see them, let them have this slider and say, I think the real value is going to be higher or lower because I know my customers. I might know a bit more about them. So what is happening now is all this data in this top table, it's the same data that I'm loading into my Power App here down here, my Power App visual. You'll see my little report, and we've got what we've called the adjusted forecast and the original forecast here. And this is by customer name and by month. So right now, the adjusted and the original is the same. The adjusted forecast is just the original forecast, which is the forecast column, times the adjusted amount. So right now it's all at 1, so they're the same. But we might say we want a user to be able to update this value. Maybe they want to change the adjusted value. They think they're going to sell a lot more because they've spoken to this customer and this customer is ready to buy more than the forecast suggests. So they want to be able to change this adjustment value for this specific month for this customer. So they want to change this adjustment value here. How they're going to do that is they're just going to have this slider, and this slider, it's a percentage. So they're going to say, hey, I think actually we're going to sell 150%, so 1.5 times as much as the forecasted value. You'll see when the user changes that, we had the original amount, which is our forecast, which is what our algorithm predicted. And then we have this adjusted forecast. And that's just that 1.17 million times our 150% of 1.5. And so they're saying, I think actually we're going to sell about 26 million. So heading over to the Power App, what actually this does, and we'll run through this code very quickly. We'll go more in depth, but I'm actually using a patch function here. This Power App, as well as being connected to my Power BI, is connected directly to the database that Power BI reads. I'm not going to go into the formula here, but essentially what it's doing is it's looking up the specific customer number, the sales rep number, and the month. And then it's saying, I want to update this value. I want to update the column adjusted amount by the slider value. And it's divided by 100 because this is a percentage. So and then it will just navigate to the success page. So what it's going to say as well, I also want to, go to display mode, and I want to have a condition here. I want to say if there's more than one row, I don't want them to press this button because I only want them to be able to do one row. So now you can see this, and you can see without when one row is selected, I'm able to press enter, and I'm able to update the value. When I press enter, what has actually happened now is it's taken that slider value of 101.5 and it's updated my database. To see my data model here, you can see that this forecast table is actually direct query. So everything else is imported to composite model. My table is in a direct query mode. So this means that I'm able to instantly see the results in my Power BI report. So if I head back over to my Power BI report here, you can't see anything yet, but you do actually need to refresh the visuals because direct query, you need to refresh the cache of the visuals. So once I press refresh, you'll actually notice that on the left, my value has changed. And we'll go again if you didn't quite catch that. But you'll see here for this value, which I updated, that line here is the original amount. So that's the 17 million. The adjusted forecast is my 1.5 value times the adjusted amount. Let me switch this down and watch the value over in the top left here. So now I've just readjusted this to actually half the original amount. So watch this value as I press refresh. You can see now that my Power Apps wrote this data back to the database, and in real time, I'm able to refresh. This is native write back, and I'm able to see it instantly by clicking this refresh button, just refreshing the cache. So very, very, very cool. As I say, very high level, not very technical view. I wanted to show this really quick way of how we can embed Power Apps into our Power BI.
So Steve, if we're using like a dashboard, whether it's, because you're showing when something's published online, you also showed Power BI desktop. Are you able to use, I guess to confirm Power Apps embedded within Power BI desktop or within the cloud, you're able to really, use it wherever you need it. Yeah,
exactly. So, I wanted to show you the data model behind, which had this direct query. Obviously, if you have a Power BI where you have a refresh schedule, you'll have to wait for the refresh schedule to hit in order to see your results. What happened in this instance, though, is I loaded data from Power BI. I loaded a table. It passed that table into Power Apps. I then, with a slider, adjusted my own value. And then Power Apps wrote this back to a database. So the data flow went Power BI, Power Apps, to the database, which then was loaded back into Power BI. So a nice loop here, nice way to natively write back. Of course, you don't have to write back to the same data source, right? Once that data is in Power Apps, you can do anything with it. You could send it an email. You could write it to a different database. Write back is kind of one of the most common use cases, the most common ways of doing things.
Quick question regarding, what would be the process if we didn't have a Power App to update, one of those records or something like that? So how would you do an update without using Power Apps? Like, how have you seen that done through your experience?
Yeah, that is a big question people have been asking for ages in Power BI. Power BI is a reporting tool, so there's no native way to do write back or anything like that. Either, you might have to go to your Dynamics or your SQL database and manually update it. There is a few very cool custom visuals that you can pay for and embed into Power BI and do that. But, you're not always able to use those in companies. This way, though, is a nice out-of-the-box way that you can actually, out of the box, you need to obviously set some stuff up and build your Power App, but a visual in Power BI and easy way to do this. So one of the coolest ways, I think, and best ways of doing this.
Awesome.
So then the second thing I want to show you, and I told you this is going to be a whirlwind tour. We're going to go really, really quick through everything. The other way, right? So we saw this Power App embedded in a Power BI report, which took data from Power BI, did something with that data, in this case, wrote it to a SQL database. The other way, of course, is by putting Power BI into a Power App. Now, traditionally, you can go into Insert here, and in Charts, you have this Power BI tile. And then you can say, hey, I want to connect this. What this is, though, is it's a dashboard tile on a Power BI dashboard. Now, I don't know how many people in this audience ever use dashboards in Power BI and use tiles. It's probably not a lot. Tiles aren't great. They're not very, very used. I'm not a big fan personally. So really, I don't use dashboards. I don't think anyone does. However, there is something you can do, which is maybe a little hidden. Been out for a few months now, but if we go over here and we select our Power BI tile, even though it's a tile, we have something called Allow New API. Default is set to false. I'm going to go set this to true. And now we've got a new hidden feature that's been turned on. You can't see anything. I've got a Power BI report, right? A full-on Power BI report, not a dashboard, not a tile. I'm just going to say File. I'm going to embed this report. And I'm going to get this secure embed link here. Heading back over to my Power Apps. Now I can go down. If I select my Power App, my tile, say tile URL. I'm just pop this URL in here. And just like magic, you just sign in. So luckily, signs me in straight away. I have my full Power BI report embedded into my Power App, right? And I can use it and it's fully usable. Exactly what I wanted, just like Power BI. Pretty cool, right? Obviously.
That's awesome, actually.
Yeah, very, very awesome. This, though, right now, obviously I could just go to Power BI. Opens up a whole lot of really, really interesting things, really interesting use cases. One is, if we want to have a custom landing page, something like this. With Power Apps, of course, if I head over to my demo, here's a little quick demo I built. If I go to my tile URL here, you'll notice that my tile URL, I have my report URL, and then I have this concatenate function, which concatenates some options. So what I've got at the top for you is I've put my report URL and my options, so you'll see what happens. Each of my buttons here actually just sets my report URL. So this 2 buttons just changes the report URL. So what I do have here is if I press my $, you can see it changed my report URL, and it can actually take me to a different report, load a different report. All your RLS and everything still applies with Power Apps.
Steve, do you feel like when you click on these buttons, it loads really fast on your computer. Do you feel like you see anything from like a performance perspective, like it goes slow when you embed any of these on a Power App?
No, not really. Unless you've got a slow loading Power BI report,
Yeah.
you're still, all you're doing is just taking that Power BI and just showing it in Power Apps.
Yeah,
So,
it looks really great. I mean, when you load
Yeah.
it loaded really quick. So that's from a performance perspective. I was actually expecting it to go a little bit slower, but it's almost as fast as, you know, loading a web page.
Yeah, and I think that's to do as well with everything being Microsoft. You're all in the same ecosystem here.
Yeah.
You're not talking to different services. Really, really great. Different way. Here, you could have a nice custom landing page. Power Apps is so dynamic. You can do so many interesting things. Different ways, you know, you can, all the things. I'll show you a couple of examples that I've thought as well at the end.
Producer Mike popping in here on the corner here while I'll give Steve a little quick breath on Power. I love this part. This is an amazing demo of how easy it is to get Power BI reports embedded into applications. I do a ton of work with companies on working with them to help them embed things. And this, the speed, Anthony, that you talk about there is actually really a great question, because if you can embed it in PowerBI.com, the speed at which you see in PowerBI.com versus here will be identical. Really, because the idea is if you have to build the report for speed. So if the report is slow in PowerBI.com, it will be slow in your embed. If the report is fast in PowerBI.com, the report will be fast here as well. That's the really neat part about this is the Power BI is a web-based centric tool. And as long as you build for web, the report will run snappy and be fast no matter where you go. And there's a lot more that goes down to that deeper end of the echelon there when you get into development stuff. But this is incredibly speedy. And I just want to point out, This is an amazing feature on how fast you can get stuff embedded into Power Apps and get going.
Well, when I work with customers and we have, you know, dashboards that we're working with, typically they're outside of, you know, Power Platform.
Yes.
So I could see, you know, the way that this is loading so quickly, how we could just pull it into a page and then allow it to all live in the same space. A lot of times, actually, we have, you know, people that are working with a lot of data, and maybe it would make sense to, instead of showing the data through Power Apps, we would have that Power BI report, you know, do that kind of heavy lifting for us. Like you said, you know, you build the right data model on the back end.
Yes.
You're using two different products, so you need two different kind of expertise and things like that. So it's a little bit different. But if you do have that, then it sounds like that might be, there's a lot of benefit to it.
I'll add one more point there, Anthony, as you explore this idea. This concept is really rich. I really like how you're going into this one. Ever heard of something called Fabric? And I know Anthony's going to smile here because he was just teasing me about this earlier. Fabric has this really interesting relationship between the data and the report side of things with a new connection called Direct Lake. Now, if you imagine this, we've been talking about here about a closed loop situation where I do something with data, I put the data somewhere, and then I need that data to immediately show up in Power BI. There is this concept around Power BI is a report only. You can only see data coming out of Power BI. But what Steve has been talking about earlier is this round robin loop of going back into Power BI and loading that data in. And with Direct Lake, you actually shorten the time between when data can be created and data can be reloaded back into the Power BI data set, because you don't need to refresh the Power BI data set anymore. Direct Lake will immediately go back and pull the tables directly from the lake as well. So just stay tuned. All that stuff's in preview. Microsoft is still building it. But I am very hopeful as looking at this new world that we're stepping into. I could see a much tighter integration in the future here between Fabric, Power Apps, and Power BI, be able to manipulate, edit, change data, and have that data almost instantly show up inside the report. So there's a very compelling story to learn this technology.
So quick question on that. So when Steve had shown, you know, there was a configuration in there to refresh. So instead of having that, you would have like this direct connection that would just be automatically updating.
It may be out of the scope of this call, but I think the answer is yes. And Steve, go ahead, take it away from there, Steve.
Yeah, I was just saying, I was using direct query mode in there, which is every time a user kind of views it, it directly queries the database.
Correct.
Mike was talking about this new mode, which is direct query times 10 plus import, and it's, you know,
like on the lake. It's really cool.
Okay.
Well, watch, go to the Power BI Tips YouTube channel, and anyone watching, there's some really great videos. I think Mike's going to go ping us some links now.
I'll go grab some links for you. We've done a full
conversation on that in Power Apps.
Yeah, we've done a full conversation around, so we have a whole 15 video series around just learning more about Fabric. We're just trying to get our head around what is Fabric, how to use it, what can you manipulate, and we talk about this direct lake feature that you can build data sets on top of your lakes. Sorry,
Cool.
producer Mike are out. I'm going to get out of here. You guys keep going. This is great.
No, thanks. Yeah, that was a really great point, Mike. One I hadn't really even thought about with direct lake. That's going to make this really, really more interesting. And Anthony, to your points as well, I think this is really exciting, and there's a lot more you can do in Power Apps. I've shown you, hey, I've just pressed a button, right, and it's changed report URL. Something I've actually done in the past is imagine you're out at a site, doing site visits, and maybe you're doing this on your mobile device. What Power Apps can do is it can actually grab your location data, right, your longitude and latitude. In my database, all my sites, I put their longitude and latitude. Once you have those, you can easily see a nice little formula to say which site you're actually closest to. And then it will load the data of the site that you're closest to. So using your geolocation data from Power Apps, it can manipulate which report you want to load. When I turn up at a site, I can just open my app. It will know where I am, Power Apps, and it will load that specific site.
Like your region maybe or something. Yeah.
And even you're visiting a location, it will know, and you can really, really, really cool options. A couple of more things here. I've got a couple of options. So you can do a couple of things, right, as well. You can use the URLs up here. So what I just did is I pressed this button and it added some options, right? And I'll turn these all on and off. All on, and you can see what I've done here is, I've got this nav content pane, this action bar. So the action bar actually gave me this edit view, right? My nav content pane kind of changed how I looked, and I've got my filter pane. And just by turning on and off these manipulating URL, you can actually change the options of the Power BI report. Just turn the filter pane off there. I want to take off edit mode. I want to take off this export and share. I can just take off this action bar. So again, lots of cool things you can do. Really manipulate using the Power Apps. Manipulate who you are. Kind of have your own landing screen. Look at where you are geographically. All the things I'm sure Anthony will know a lot more of awesome Power Apps tricks that you can do, because everything's dynamic here. Really, really cool, and lots of interesting things to think about.
Hey, Steve, with the filters that you were applying, or not filters, but like the options that you were applying, is there maybe a list or somewhere that you found like, hey, this is how you kind of like add these different options, or how did you find those options and know that those were available?
These are part of the embedded API options. There's not documented, so be careful if you're using these. They've been working for a while. There's no specific list.
Okay.
Pause the video here or come back and watch it. These ones are the ones that are working. Really, though, I think the cool one is just changing the actual report URL, right, and manipulating that based on your need. Build yourself a cool loading page, something like that.
Yeah, it looks great.
Fantastic. So I think with that, I'll quite like to go and talk to something we've built together in Power Apps. If you're watching me and Anthony, you may have known about our version control app, which is actually built in conjunction with Power BI Tips here. It's strictly a Power Apps product, but one that actually manipulates and helps you manage Power BI. So if we just kind of switch back maybe to my screen, and I'm just going to go quickly run through how the app works. So version control in Power BI, Git, all this kind of new cool Git stuff's coming out. Really, really exciting. However, not all users know how to use Git. Sometimes you want a bit of a lighter touch. We quite like using SharePoint for Power BI files, especially if you're with a team who doesn't know Git, who might not, in this Fabric developer mode, which is quite a lot of Power BI report users. So let's quickly run through what the app does, and then Anthony's going to jump in and just going to show how it was built in Power Apps in order to manage Power BI files. So what we have is it basically all runs off SharePoint. Power App just to manage your Power BI files in SharePoint. SharePoint has a great built-in version control system with it where you can check out, see histories and roll back. So the idea is what you will have is you'll set up a SharePoint site. And in your site, you'll have two folders, one called Publish Reports and one called Checked Out Reports. What you want to do then is you want to sync using the sync function in SharePoint. You sync this with your local machine, and you only want to sync the Checked Out Reports folder, right? So we have a Publish Reports folder in SharePoint. This is where our live reports are. Then we also have a Checked Out Reports folder. That Checked Out Report folder, we sync to our local machine. When we sync it, that means anything that's in that folder, it will appear on a folder in a machine as if it's on our desktop. And then, right, the one in SharePoint, basically anything in the Publish Reports folder in SharePoint, that's also what's published on PowerBI.com. So what happens? Imagine we've got these two reports, A and B, that are published. They're in our SharePoint folder. We've also published them to PowerBI.com. If we ever want to make a change, what we do is essentially, user wants to modify report A. So what they do is they run the Power BI app. What the Power BI version control app does is it actually makes a copy of this report. It copies it to the checked out reports folder. Because that folder is synced to our local machine, that copy of that report appears in our local machine folder as well. We work on copies because we don't want to work on the original file until we're happy and know our changes. It's very easy to accidentally save and mess up. So we always want to work on a copy. Then SharePoint actually has something, and the Power App manages all this for you, where it checks the file out. What that means is it puts a little tag on the file, and it doesn't let anyone else kind of edit this file. It says, I'm working on the file. So here we have it. Report A in our published reports folder up here is report A published to Power BI. So this is our report. Then we've made a copy into the checked out reports folder, which we can see in our local machine because it's synced. If someone else actually tries to edit this, right, they're actually blocked. So this checked out file stops them from editing. So we know two people can't be working at the same time and make changes, and then we have to try and merge those changes. Very hard with a PBIX file without using Git. So once the edits though are complete, what we do is we save our file. We actually go back to our Power BI version control app. We check in the folder. And what that does is we actually give it comments and say what we've changed. And then it merges these back into the published reports. The good thing with this is every time we do this, we'll add comments to say what we've changed. SharePoint will keep a version history as well. So if we ever want to go back in time, roll back changes, we can see every single version that we changed. We can download a copy of that at that particular point in time and restore and go back in case we've messed something up. With that, I think we'll head over to Anthony and he'll kind of go over and show us how it was built.
Awesome. Thanks, Steve. So quick question. When would somebody want to use, like, let's say Git versus, SharePoint in your opinion?
Yeah, great question. Git is a very enterprise grown-up story, I think. Probably the way you want to start looking at, you want to be moving. One thing that is the issue with Git and Power BI users is a lot of people come from the business side. They come from Excel. A lot of your users who are editing and making these reports probably won't know what Git is, probably won't know how to use tools like Azure DevOps and GitHub, right? It takes a bit of training. What this does, I think, is really, we still want users to do version control, right? If you've ever worked with teams and you have final version _17, right? And then your initials afterwards. We want to avoid all of that. People working on their desktop. You always want to have some sort of version control. If we're not going to be able to have the skills to use Git, something like that, then this is a great stepping stone on getting people on that journey.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, I think it's important to understand because, like you said, there's still a way to be able to serve that that citizen developer / that the people that are beginning in this space, or maybe they've developed in Power BI or Power Apps or whatever the case might be for a long time, but never really had that version history to save, and be able to go back on. So that's certainly helpful. So I'm going to walk through just on the screen here, how we get started, what it would look like when you get it implemented, how to get it implemented, and then we'll go from there. So first, starting at powerbi.tips, I just searched, version control here, and then it popped up the Power BI version control ready to use solution. So I'm just going to quickly run through this. And so we've had, a lot of feedback from multiple companies that had said, hey, we want to use this. Can you implement X? Hey, we want to use this. Can you implement Y? And we've taken all those suggestions in, and we've made version 2.0. So that actually just came out earlier this year, and there was quite a bit of time that we put into that. So, shout out to Steve and Mike and James for, we all got together at like some random time just over the winter and spent, a number of nights together to get it to where it is now. So walking through this real quick, from a blog perspective, we have the detailed instructions on how to get it installed, why you'd use it, things like that. All text-based walkthrough, but then we also here at the end, I'm going to keep scrolling. We have the install instructions, and then we also have the other video here that just talks about like user instructions and how an end user would actually take advantage of using version control with Power BI, through this app. So we have both videos that cover that. So with that, then you would just go to do the download. There's a download button on there. I know Mike has shared that inside the comments as well, so feel free to download there. However, one thing I will challenge Mike on, I don't know if we care to share this or not, but I wonder how many downloads are we at now? Because last time we talked, it was a lot, but now it's been...
Yeah, let me check it. I'll go pull some numbers here. I think we're in the tens of thousands of downloads at this point, but let me just go check. I'll just confirm the numbers there for you.
Yeah, we were at a pretty awesome number at some, when a couple of years ago when we looked at it. I mean, when we first did 1.0, but yeah, I'm curious. So thank you for that. And so I'm going to just jump over now to the actual install of what it would be to install the Power BI version control app. So first you would download it, you'd have a zip file, then you would upload it to Power Apps, and then you would start out with, a fresh version control solution inside of Power Apps. So after clicking upload and import, basically it'll give you all of these 6 components. With that, there are 2 flows that are primary to working with the app that Steve has shown earlier. We also have a getting started flow here as well. So the initial step, if you run this flow, it'll actually, and you give it the site collection of where you're going to be storing your reports, and then the library, it'll actually create a library for you in that site collection to get you started. So you don't have to go out there and mess around with creating specific columns or creating a specific document library to store these. There's a one-click button, and actually I'll just click on this to see how fast that last one went. Because even when we first created this, we did create it for performance. We created it so that it would be really simple to kind of pull this into any generic system and then click a button and then run with it, assuming that you have site collection or site admin permissions on that SharePoint site. But I would say that Power Automate has had some juice put behind it, because it only took 2 seconds to create the actual document library and all the specific columns. So I clicked go, and then it said that it was done already, and I'm like, wait a second, that can't be right. So I opened up SharePoint, and then I saw it, and I was like, that's actually incredible. So I guess I'm just pointing out that there are the benefit of using Power Automate is that this took maybe 10 seconds or 20 seconds before, and now it's down to 2 seconds. So I just saw that, and I wanted to call that out. So thank you, Mike, for the update. Did you want? I mean, you can share that, or I can share it with the.
Yeah, I can pop in here.
Yeah.
So right now, currently, we have around 7,000 or so downloads of this tool directly. So I was a little bit off, not in the tens of thousands. We have another tool that we've community built as well. Steve has also contributed that one as well, called Business Ops, and we are well in the 40,000 downloads area for that as well. So these are pretty popular tools, awesome. And people wouldn't continue downloading them if they weren't finding value from these tools. So I think you'll love this and be able to see how this could quickly add value to your organization as well.
Completely free, by the way. I just want to add, is free, always will be. You get the whole download, all the source code. So completely community, get it, you own it, you can modify it and use it however you want.
Yeah, no, good point. And thank you for looking up those numbers, Mike. Yeah, so 7,300 downloads. That means that potentially this is not going to be a 1-for-1, but that could be 7,300 companies that are using this this download. However, it's more than likely not that many. Even if it was half, or if it was 1/4, or whatever it might be, that's still a lot of organizations that are out there that are using it. Both Steve and I have been on support calls just to support this app. Just to help people out to install it, and if they run into any issues, we want to know about it so that we can make improvements. And that's how we got to 2.0. But ultimately, there are some big name companies that were using it, and I thought that was pretty exciting. So I thought, Mike, thanks for letting me put you on the spot and pulling those numbers up. All right. So next, so initially I had ran this initial step, and then I went through, I created a reports library with the folders. So I'm just going to show you what that would look like when you run that initial step after installing the solution itself. So I'm going to go here. Ultimately, so if I go to site contents, I'm just using a version control specific site collection. Maybe you have an analytics or a data type of site collection that everybody shares their stuff in. Ultimately, then it could just go into that same site collection, whether it's inside of a Teams SharePoint site, if it's associated with a team, or if it's a communication site. It doesn't really matter, in terms of where you start, as long as it's a SharePoint site collection and you have the permissions to create a new document library. In either case, what it did do is it created this Power BI reports document library. So I'll click on that. And then it created these two folders. And so it created the checked out and published reports. And it's important that all the letters and so forth are matching with this. And if they're not, and you decide to change the name for, whatever the reason might be, then you can go out there and update it inside the Power App so that, everything's seeing eye to eye. In either case, it does create both of these. And then what I just did momentarily, 33 minutes ago, I had uploaded some Power BI reports just to show the check-in, check-out process. So again, it did create all of this for me just with that one click of the button. I know it's pretty simplistic, but we've got a lot of questions on how to get started, creating the right names, creating the right columns and folders. So this really helps streamline that, and then also reduce the number of support, let's say, questions and calls that we've been on. All right, so outside of that, once I open up the app, so inside that solution, I had imported it. Now I clicked edit on the Power App and I open it up in edit mode. This is what a Canvas app looks like in edit mode. So you can see up here, there's the formula bar here, the properties drop down, there's the properties pane. So there's all this stuff that kind of comes at you at one time. So if you're not familiar with Power Apps, it can be a little overwhelming because there's so many options. But luckily, Steve, honestly, he is super creative, and I give him the majority of the credit for creating the setting screen, or I'm sorry, the admin screen. This one here, actually. Let me just go here, admin screen, click on settings. So I give him so much credit. We spent so much time together. One day he left and came back, and then he's like, I got it. So we spent a lot of time on making sure that when you import this, it's as easy as possible for any organization just to plug in as little things as possible to get it to work. So as you can see on screen, it has a bunch of red dots, right? And it's clearly, got some errors, and there's things that are happening on it that you would say, this isn't right, because you're seeing these red dots. Ultimately, what that means is you can see down here, there's a little bit of an error that's showing update data source. So there's kind of these little errors all over the place that'll pop up depending on, if you have a data source or if the folder name is wrong. We've built in a lot of error handling to make sure that when somebody installs it, that it'll kind of point them in the right direction, what could be, going on there. So when you first import, you do have to add a data source. So that's what I'm going to do is I'm going to add that SharePoint library that had been created. So I'm going to click on add data. I'm going to type in SharePoint. Click on SharePoint. I already have that connection created, so I'm able to reuse that same connection that I've already have created. If that wasn't created, then I would just click add connection and then kind of go through the process there. So first I'm going to click on SharePoint. You can see here that it's not showing the site that I need because it did mention version control in the title. So I'm not seeing that here. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to paste in version control. I'm going to click in connect. All right. So now when I clicked connect and I pasted in that URL for that site collection, I'm now able to see the different lists and libraries that I can connect to. So clicking on Power BI reports as the one that I want to connect to, I'm going to click connect. You can see here that it's loading. Doesn't usually take this long, but I did recently disconnect from that data source just to make sure it was going to work on this demo. So let's see if this gives us what we want, or I have to refresh this page. So maybe adding and retracting could have caused this to go a little slower. It's probably confused. Oh, there we go. All right, so that has been added. Power BI reports, you can see that it's now connected to that document library. And then all those errors went away, even the error at the bottom. We see checkboxes here, allowing us to understand that, hey, this is doing its job and that it's going to work. So if you see a bunch of errors, if you just see one error on the screen, there's probably a little bit of cause for concern that you want to say, may not be, working.
I would also say if you use our flow, which sets this up, it should all work as soon as you connect the data source. This uses a folder called Power BI reports, or a library. And then it uses two folders, one called checkout and one called publish reports. We understand, though, people might have their own processes, or they might not want to name it that. So if you do see, those red boxes, you can see 1, 2, 3, 4 here, the boxes. You just go up and you just give it the names of your folders and your libraries. You just need to change the names. By default, it's Power BI reports, checked out and published. If you wanted to do it, though, that's probably the reason why.
Yep, great point. So again, walking through 1, 2, and then 3 and 4, assuming that if you keep it all the same, like you said, all good to go, change it, you'll have to go in and just make some modifications. It's pretty straightforward. However, this does walk you through, and actually Steve had this on screen earlier with the URL. As he was clicking buttons, it was showing more on screen. So that's where, you were seeing it build out that URL. This is the same thing that we're seeing here. It has the URL here. Power BI reports is the document library, then checked out is the folder, and then actually it's going to make a subfolder of my name as I check things out. So it'll go into my specific folder. And then same thing here with the publish reports. It'll just look there, and you can see that's the publish reports and Power BI reports there. And thanks, Brad. I do agree. The demo gods are with us on this one. It was tempting me for a second to refresh, but I'm glad that it went through. I can see how that would cause a little bit of frustration as we get into specifically like demoing some of these things that we've demoed before. So I'm glad that went through. So now we have everything connected here. The Power BI version control. I'm back on the home screen. So this is the front page when someone opens up the app. Actually what they'll see. So let's walk through kind of the process here really quick, and then we'll see where we got to go next. So I'll click play. Clicking play will actually allow us to use this app as it's intended, but in edit mode. So if I were to send this URL to somebody to use the app, they would see the same screen. But right now we're in edit mode and we click play. So clicking check reports out would bring me to the checkout report screen. And then if I wanted to check any of my reports back in, I would click on this button. So I'm going to click on check reports out. So you can see I had added those 3 Power BI reports to the SharePoint site earlier. So that's why you're able to see these 3 here now. If I wanted to do any type of filtering, so I could do that there. If I wanted to refresh, if I recently added in anything from, any other new reports, and I've already had this app already opened on my screen, you click on this refresh button, and then it'll automatically pull in those new reports. So if I want to click this, it does allow me now to click on the checkout report. So let's just say I want to check out 2 of these. I would click on checkout reports. I'm just going to do one at a time. You can see here it helps us, kind of identify. So if we had, 50 reports or 100 reports, whatever it might be, if we have that many in here, that's where, it kind of helps us say, yeah, you've clicked on 3, or maybe you didn't mean to click on 3, or maybe you want to uncheck one. Gives us that clarification. I'm going to click on check route reports. You can see here it gives us a little bit of a screen to say, please be patient. If this is a large file, then please give it a moment. I've actually never ran a demo with this one, so hopefully Brad. Okay, I think we're in good.
I'll jump into one point here as well. I think just to clarify, this does copy reports. This is designed as well, to Anthony's point earlier, designed for probably reports and those visual reports. It's not really designed for data sets, and especially large data sets. So if you're doing big data sets, if you're doing lots of data, there's probably more robust version control, kind of Git and that stuff you should look at. But really, when you're doing smaller files, if you're doing Power BI reports, live connected ones, this is a really, really nice way to go.
Yeah, no, great point. And we have gotten a lot of questions. Hey, it's failed. And our first question is, what's all contained inside that report? Because sometimes when they're really large like that, we've had people that go over a gig. And although SharePoint can support it, when you're copying files and moving them around like that, it's not necessarily built for that either. So that's where we'll run into some issues with the cloud flows and things like that.
This probably isn't a process you'd want to do with files that size. You'd want to do Git and do the metadata only deployment, this kind of stuff when it's that big.
And that is Steve's department. I would say, hey, can we do it? And he's like, hey, no, we shouldn't do it. So that totally makes sense. That's great. So you can see here on screen that the files have finished processing. And then you can click the home button if you're complete and you want to keep the app open, or you can just X out the whole tab or what have you. So I'm going to click on home just so we can go back to the home screen. So let's just say I made my edits and I want to go back and check it in. I could do that now. Real quick though, I do want to I want to bring into the SharePoint site back into things. When I'm designing these Power Apps and I'm working with SharePoint or I'm working with Dataverse, whatever it might be, I try to allow those products own as much of the functionality as possible. I don't want to rebuild, functionality inside of Power Apps. So we could have had, an upload screen inside of Power Apps if we wanted, or we could have, done things a little bit differently. But SharePoint's really good at managing that copy and paste. It's really good at managing, version control. It's really good at managing, a lot of things. So if we can allow people to interact with SharePoint the way that it's intended, but then automate things on top of that, that's really where we can help streamline that process. And you really see a lot of, big wins because people get to know SharePoint, they use the way that it's intended. Then they get to know Power Apps and they use the way that it's intended. And you allow both of those products do what they're good at. So I'm gonna go to checked out reports. Now you can see that this was just created 3 minutes ago, that I have now a checked out folder. And then I should have, yep, it looks like I have that Power BI dashboard that's there. And this is just from the COE toolkit. And so it's checked out to me. And so nobody actually can go in there and modify that or check it back in unless they're an admin. So there is some overriding capabilities as an admin, which is really special because if somebody has something checked out and those people are on vacation, but you absolutely need to check that back in for whatever reason, from an admin perspective, that's possible. So I do have that as checked out. And Steve, yeah, you want to add something?
Yeah, I was going to say when you're in that checked out folder there,
yeah,
maybe yep, you see Anthony's got his own folder here. This is where he would press that sync button. So if he goes into his Anthony folder,
yep, and
yep.
then
so if you go into that folder,
there we go. Yep, there we go.
Yeah, this will make it appear as a folder on your local machine. So what you can do is you can just press this checkout button and it will appear, like it's on your local machine, which I think is really, really neat.
Agreed. Yep. And so to Steve's point, more from a local standpoint, that's how you'd be able to connect, your Power BI desktop to it very seamlessly. And you could have it just be looking at that syncing folder and always pull the latest one. So I'm certainly making your life a little bit easier as you're using. It's the OneDrive sync, but it's using it within, within these document libraries. All right. So going back here, now that we're things are checked out inside of the published as well. So I'm going to go back to Power BI reports, allow that to sit there. And I'm just going to go back into the check-in reports. So you can see here that, I'm allowed to either discard the report because, hey, let's say I was going to make a change, but I never did. So I could click on discard reports. If I wanted to check this report back in and, add a comment, I could do that here. So then I would say,
always add comments as well.
Yes.
Be very
so Steve, I guess, why didn't we make this required?
Not everyone will, but I think it's best practice. Maybe
I
some
do
people
agree.
would be annoyed if it was. Maybe
Yeah.
we should, hey? Force
Yeah,
those best
force people into
practices on
best
people.
practices. Yeah, I agree. So mandatory comments, I just put something in there just because we were talking about it, but checking in the report. So it's the same button that we saw on the other screen. So it's a very familiar look and feel as you were checking out. So I'm gonna click this button. So the other option again is discarding it, and then that would just cancel that and then check that report. It would cancel that checked out. It would discard the checkout on the original file so that it wouldn't save anything. So now here it's actually grabbing a copy of this and overlaying it onto the original file. And then what that does is now makes it version 2. So if we go back here, I go to publish reports. You can see that this was published now just a few seconds ago. And if I went to version history, now it has both 1.0 and 2.0, and it shows those mandatory comments.
Yeah, and on that view as well is really great. So every single version that you have, you're able to download, to roll back, to see if you ever make mistakes, don't realize for a few days, you can roll it back and undo all the changes and try again, which is very, very helpful, I think.
Yep, no, that's a good point. And Brad actually in the comments here is talking about making sure that you understand how OneDrive Sync works. There are limitations to it because it is specifically made for OneDrive. And if you use it outside of OneDrive and you're using it for, the document libraries, there's limitations, right? So understanding how that works. And he was just saying that, there's a lot of things that, in terms of support, sometimes you'll run into an error. With this, we've made sure that it's, mostly error-free, given the requirements that we're using for this application. But if you were to add, additional things like metadata and have to check in with metadata, that's where it automatically fails. So certainly keeping that in mind, Brad, as you're using OneDrive Sync in this case, and then you want to apply it to another one, keep those limitations in mind. Awesome. So I know we're at time here and we brought it right to the end. This was awesome and totally a great refresher. I'm happy to be here. I hope that we can start doing these, once a month.
Yeah, it's been really great, and really, really nice to join with Power BI and Power Apps and the whole Power Platform. Lucky to have Anthony here. He's a senior cloud architect on the Power Platform team at Microsoft. So really, really good crew, and it's I certainly learn a lot in these calls and building and stuff with him.
I feel like to some degree we've upgraded this user group by a little bit here. We've got an official Microsoft employee helping us out. Anthony's got a wealth of experience. One of the things we'll find as consulting and or how all this works, when you get involved with an organization like Microsoft, when you get involved in like consulting spaces in general, you get a lot more exposure to many more problems, more organizations. And I think really, the expertise that we get here, Anthony and Steve and myself to some degree, I can't really speak so much about Power Apps at this point, but the team here really knows the heart of the customers and understands a holistic picture of what your organization is struggling with and areas where we can reduce friction here. So I'm very excited to see the group get back going again. I think we're gonna have a lot more cool content coming out. We are definitely growing. The only ask that we give you guys as the team here is make sure you go recommend this this video to somebody else, share it with somebody else. We love you to share it on social media. It helps get the word out there and helps us continue to grow the ecosystem and the community that is around Power BI, Power Apps, the whole Power Platform. This is going to be a great career, and all three of us have decided to make this stuff our career, and we think that you should also as well and keep focusing on this because I think more companies need help in this area. With that, thank you guys so much. We really appreciate everyone here. We will see you next time, and stay tuned for another meeting sometime, I guess would be next month or in a couple months. So stay tuned. Follow us on social media channels. That's where we'll advertise when things come out. And thank you guys very much. Great presentation today.
Thanks, all.
Thanks, Ian.
Great to be here.
Thank you.
See you guys.